So today I'm really excited as we're going to jump into a new book, the book of James or Yaakov. But who of you knows that if you turn to your scriptures, this is the New King Jimmy here, the New King James. I like to bring it with me because it's got a lot of my pencil notes over the years. But who here understands that the little introductions that you get before you go into a book, they are not suffice for what we are about to do these next few weeks. So please bear with me if I don't follow the introductions in these commentary scriptures that we've had in the 20th century, whether it be the NIV, the New King James, or whatnot. Because, as I've said so many times before, a text out of context creates a pretext, and error begets error. It is so huge for us to truly grasp, before we even get into chapter and verse, what on earth was going on at the writing of this book. What was going on in the culture, what was going on in the surrounding vicinity, what was going on with the people. Who are the people? Who is the author? And what did he do that for? He freed them from slavery so that he could enslave them under the law. Oh, well, that makes sense. No, it doesn't. That's insanity. But that's what religion teaches you. He freed them from slavery so he could shackle them to the law. Well, now we've just traded Pharaoh, one tyrant, for another. So your view of the father is that he's a tyrant that enslaves his children. No. He freed you from slavery so he could bring you to the mountain, Exodus 24, and give you the book of the covenant, which is the law of liberty. A break at one point will not be contained. The cracking and the crazing will spread over your entire so-called Torah-observant lifestyle. It will fall apart. A Torah with no book of the covenant, no book of the law distinction cracks and crazes without division. What are you going to do with a Melchizedek high priest with your pile of stones of Torah? It's not going to work. If there is no division between the book of the law and the book of the covenant, and you put into that the book of Hebrews and that Yahusha is your Melchizedek, your glass of undivided Torah will crack and craze. Because Genesis 1:1 all the way to Deuteronomy, the end of Deuteronomy, does not allow you to have a Melchizedek high priest. You can't pick and choose. It's not a pile of stones. You insert Yahusha as the high priest, according to Melchizedek, in an undivided Torah with no distinction between book of the law and book of the covenant. They're synonymous, which is the status quo teaching. Then it cracks and crazes the whole thing. The only way Yahusha can be your high priest after the order of Melchizedek is if you rightly divide the book of the covenant and the book of the law, Torah, and that you are now returned to the book of the covenant, which is Melchizedek. It's the only way, and it does not crack and it does not craze. But you see, they won't teach you that because they want you to pick and choose commandments from a pile of stones. It is literally a Luciferic rabbinical Zionism. And it is really, really prevalent. Mishle 18, verse 21. Death and life are in the hands of the tongue, and those who live will eat of its fruit. What's going on here? Now the tongue has a set of hands? I love this. What is he talking about? You see, here's a teaching that builds scripture upon scripture to prevent us from reaching a false conclusion. Because as the hand can commit murder, well, there so can the tongue, right? But you don't want to draw the false conclusion. Because if you were to conclude falsely that the hand can only commit murder in the case of what's nearby, also the tongue can only commit murder to those that are nearby, right? Wrong. Well, Yahweh makes sure that we don't draw that false conclusion by giving us the words of the prophet Yirmiyahu. Their tongue is sharpened like arrows. Yirmiyahu 9, verse 7. Because the tongue can commit murder even from a great distance like an arrow, can it not? But anyway, this is my heart, deceitfully wicked above all things. At the end of the day, the reason I came to faith is because I knew that if there was redemption, that it could not be found in anything that I did. And that if there was redemption, it had to be outside of myself and outside of any man that is dead. And when I was given the truth of the resurrection of Yahusha and the Keporah atoning coverage of sin, that I could now enter into the presence of Yahweh, I knew it was truth. Because I knew. You could put a Bible in my hand and set me out on the corner of the street, and I still would have been filthy rags. That's the works of men. But only the inward work of redemption. That's the testimony. That's the testimony that we all have. Inward purification, because we no longer are adulterers and adulteresses. Look what it says. You do not want to be a friend of the world. I hate what the world did to me, because I joined myself and became a slave with it. And I tasted of everything that it had to offer, and it was nothing but death. Romans chapter 8 verse 5 says thus, for those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh. But those who live according to the Ruach, the things of the Ruach. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and shalom. Because the fleshly carnal mind, it's an enemy of Yahweh. If you love the world, you want to go and do all of that, you are an enemy. I acknowledge I walked hand in hand with Satan, and I was an enemy of Yahweh. For all of those years, I didn't know it, because I was so blasted that I didn't care. And that's exactly what the world wants you to do. Take away your senses so that you don't even acknowledge that there are spiritual repercussions for everything you say, do, see, touch, smell, and eat. Grumble not one against another, Israelite brothers, lest you be condemned. Behold, the shofet, the judge stands before the door. We have to be careful when we approach doors. That's what this verse is teaching us. You need to be careful when you approach doors, because you're either going to approach doors of judgment in that judgment hall and feast of the foul and the beasties, Or you're going to approach the door of the Melchizedek covenant and you will be face to face with the Melchizedek himself. Revelation 3 verse 20. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice, now listen to this, in the whole context of what we've been studying about the Melchizedek, remember everything that we've spoken. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and have a covenant-confirming meal. That's the dine, the sup with him. And then Revelation 19, verse 7 is the marriage, and verse 9 is the marriage supper of the Lamb, the sup or covenant-confirming meal. Because you heeded the covenant, the calling from the voice from the mountain, Revelation 3:20, come in and sup, come in. This is the acceptance. Remember, there's a proposal, an acceptance, a covenant-confirming meal, blood ratification, and a covenant-confirming meal. That these are the four things that we always see, the fifth always attaching back to Abraham. We have a proposal, acceptance, blood ratification, and a covenant-confirming meal. And the kurios attaches us all the way back to the covenant between the pieces, the covenant of Abraham. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and have a covenant-confirming meal, dine, sup with him. Revelation 19:7 is the marriage. Revelation 19:9 is the marriage supper of the Lamb, the sup or covenant-confirming meal, because they heeded the covenant, they heeded the call, the voice from the mountain. Come in, Revelation 3:20. Let's wrap it up with Yaakov, the wrap-up. Yaakov, the half-brother of Yahusha. I'm super excited that we've spent these past weeks teaching about Yaakov. And what truly is this about? That this generation is being drawn into the realm of covenant priesthood. Not Talmud, Mishnah, and Tractate, and all of that nonsense. And that is what is so exciting, that people reaching to us, out to us from all over the globe, as this spreads like wildfire, and people are being redeemed and brought into Torah. That is covenant Torah, not Gnosticism, and truly really experiencing the Ruach HaKodesh under the mighty hand of Yahusha, our Kohen Hagadol. And Yaakov knew him more than anyone, his half-brother, Yaakov, under the Melchizedek priesthood. And we know that as he taught this book that we have gone and spent this time unpacking these past weeks, that this message that he spoke of was to those in the vicinity of Jerusalem, and that he wrote this as a homily. It wasn't to be a letter, but to be a homily, to be spoken orally to the audience. And who was that audience? In this wrap-up of everything that we've looked at over the past weeks, the audience was a Hellenized audience, and they were the recipients of this homily in the area around Jerusalem, Yerushalayim. They were in the diaspora, they were out there in the exile, and many of them in Phoenicia, Cyprus, and Antioch, including many Jewish believers that had fled Israel after the martyrdom of Zephaniah, Stephen, and we know that this was the dispersed covenant people.